And welcome to this week's edition of the Dr. Tech Show with myself and Sweyn Hunter, guiding you through the world of online communications in a show which was the brainchild of John Popham, sadly no longer with us. So Sweyn, let's go straight to the weather. And how is it? How has it been where you are?
The weather is terrible here in Orkney in the far north of Scotland. You'll have heard of Storm Arwen. Well, we got most of that on Friday and Saturday. All the ferries were cancelled. All the buses were off. Everybody's been sent home early for everything. Since then, it's snowed and melted and is now just back to its cheerful grey skies and rain. So that's good. We're all good here. How about you?
Yeah. In Birmingham on Saturday morning, we woke to snow and it was quite startling, really. I wasn't expecting it. It had snowed quite heavily. But like people were still able to get out and stuff, but I did manage to buy myself a pair of snow boots.
Oh, good for you.
In a charity shop. So I was very pleased about that. So I got out and it kind of cleared up, and now it's kind of light dusting of snow everywhere. So it's obviously snowed again, but not to keep people in. So that's good. Yeah. So we are going to be joined by a guest today, Laura Evans Hill, but she's not with us just yet. So we will carry on with the show and welcome her when she arrives. So we have around this time of year on the 3rd of December on Friday, I think it is, International Day of Persons with Disabilities. It's one of the UN days. And as they say on their website, disability inclusion is an essential condition to upholding human rights, sustainable development, and peace and security. And it's also central to the promise of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development to leave no one behind. The commitment to realizing the rights of persons with disabilities is not only a matter of justice, it's an investment in a common future. They go on to talk about the global crisis of COVID-19, deepening pre-existing inequalities, as we know, exposing the extent of exclusion and highlighting that work on disability inclusion is imperative. There's 1 billion people with disabilities in the world, and they're one of the most excluded groups in our society, and amongst the hardest hit in this crisis in terms of fatalities. Even under normal circumstances, people with disabilities are less likely to access healthcare, education, employment, and to participate in the community. And an integrated approach is required to ensure that persons with disabilities are not left behind. So disability inclusion will result in a COVID-19 response and recovery that better serves everyone, more fully suppressing the virus as well as building back better. It will provide for more agile systems capable of responding to complex situations, reaching the furthest behind first. So there's an event co-organized by the UN Department for Economic and Social Affairs, the World Intellectual Property Association Organization, and International Telecommunications Unit from 8 to 9:30 a.m. on the 3rd of December, called Reducing Inequalities Through Technologies, a Perspective on Disability Inclusive Development. So if you go to the UN website, you can find the link to that. I think you have it on screen right now, Sweyn.
I do. It's also the link to this is in the description of this YouTube video. So you can find it that way as well.
Excellent. Actually, an event I didn't even put on the grid, Sweyn, sorry to be abrupt like this, but in Birmingham tomorrow is the launch of the Birmingham Digital Inclusion Strategy, which I've had a hand in. So I'm very pleased to be going to that with various other people. So
maybe we'll
report back on that next week. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely. Another event is going back to our friends in Leeds, 100% Digital Leeds, their skills for supporting digital inclusion sessions. They've got one today and the final one is next week. And today's one is called Digital Wings, which is finding out about their partner's free online learning platform and how you can use it to develop your own skills and confidence and that of your wider team, as well as to support others. Now, they weren't announcing who this partner was, and I don't think we checked on Twitter to see did they announce who the partner was. Did you have a look?
No, I didn't notice that.
No,
I'll maybe have a look in the background for that one.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, we'll have a look and see if we can pick up who the partner was and find out for you. So that session today happened. One of them happened this morning, 11 to 12, and they're repeating it as they have done for every other session they've done in this sessions. So it's on now from 2 to 3, and it's called Digital Wings. So we hope those sessions went really well. We did publicize them, and hopefully some of our friends went to them, and we'll hear more about them in the near future.
Yes.
So we're waiting for our guest to arrive, but in the meantime, we'll go on to some of our stories. And the DPIS 21 that we have reported on the first 3 days in last week's show had another 2 days of activity and reporting from the wonderful Ciara Allman. And so we have links to the day 4 and day 5 sessions now. The day 4 one was on education and the digital divide. And as I said last week, Ciara writes really, well about these matters. And I think anybody who's interested in digital inclusion and digital poverty should make it their business to catch up on these pieces. So in this one on education, Ciara writes that this new normal arguably encompasses both the reality of blended online and offline learning that will endure beyond the COVID-19 pandemic and the realization of the profound digital inequalities that are exacerbating an education gap for already disadvantaged students. As one speaker put it, the worry is that because this period has been so challenging, educators will now walk away and just say, thank goodness. But none of the roundtable contributors, she said, seemed inclined to walk away. Speakers included 3 former Secretaries of State for Education or Children, MPs chairing other APPGs for Social Mobility and Education Technology, the Shadow Minister for Schools, the General Secretaries of the NASUWT and NEU, senior representatives of the National Association of Head Teachers, Ofsted, Teach First, UNICEF, BISA, the Learning Foundation, Times Higher Education, and Digital Unite. So it's a plethora of, the great and the good who are interested in this topic, and are also have probably the influence to be able to do something. One speaker in the article, it's pointed out that there was a quiet accrual of more mundane uses of technology, citing online vocabulary quizzes for foreign languages as an example. Although the digital classroom often conjures images of smart whiteboards and virtual reality headsets, there are fairly simple digital tools available to teachers that are underutilized for engaging students in traditional classroom settings. And this reminds me, Sweyn, of that Ben Haddock that we had on from Sandwell Fab Lab, because remember he was, his tools are probably more sophisticated, but he was trying things out to help teachers and students in the classroom. So it was an opportunity some people took to develop tools that might be more useful for people. Several speakers were part of the education system, the article goes on to say, when information technology was the new frontier, and one recalled how tech was used by some and feared by others, leading to different learning experiences for students in the classroom. So she reports that many nodding heads in her Zoom grid seem to indicate this is still a relevant issue. Another speaker pointed out that young aspiring teachers are often assumed to have digital skills, and as a result, digital skills are not included in teacher training. But it will be crucial to develop pedagogy around online and hybrid learning with a distinct focus on how to integrate digital literacies and technologies into teaching. And she goes on, the article is long, so I don't want to quote all of it, but she talks about how the pandemic blurred the lines between school and home, drawing attention to the ways in which different private environments impact learning. For example, some children have quiet private spaces to study, while others have to share devices and space, contending with distractions and demands on their time and attention. And it's, this has always been the case, but online learning during the pandemic has obviously exacerbated this. She quotes a book on parenting for a digital future. Although both better off and poorer parents try to use technology to confer advantages, they're very differently positioned to do so. And she talks about socioeconomic differences, especially pronounced in the home, where children are influenced by the dynamics of family and space. One speaker recounted how some parents on low incomes needed to borrow their children's devices during the pandemic in order to work or search for jobs. So the article goes on, and I don't want to quote too much more from it, but it's acknowledging teachers worked harder during the pandemic, as did parents, I'm sure, as well. Online parents' evenings allowed some working parents to engage with teachers. But taking a children's rights approach to education and digital divide means not only addressing the whole spectrum of children's well-being in education, but also requires children are consulted in the design and deployment of technologies to learning. So a really good article, and one that we can highly recommend.
For sure. So we have Laura, our guest, arriving now. So
excellent.
We'll just let her join the session, and then we'll say hello. Welcome, Laura, to the Dr. Tech Show.
Hello, Laura.
Hi, both. I believe we're live as well.
We are live on the show, so welcome.
We're very delighted to have you here. Laura, I've been recommended you by the Rob Allison, who is a mutual acquaintance of a friend of ours, I should say, through my work in Coventry. How do you know Rob?
So I connected with Rob on LinkedIn many, many moons ago, and that was kind of where we got to know each other really, and followed what we do very, very closely. So it feels kind of nice to finally meet people in person, even if it's not Rob yet. So that's how we know each other.
I'm trying to persuade him to come on the show. He's a bit shy, but he's happy to recommend other people. So thanks very much for coming to join us today.
I love your use of in person for a Zoom call. I approve of
that. Yeah. So on your LinkedIn, Laura, which we usually use to kind of talk about people's bios, you call yourself a pencil-wielding ex-academic.
I do indeed.
On a mission to make knowledge compelling and accessible to all through stories told with pictures. You're the director of Nifty Fox Creative, promoting digital inclusion from making knowledge more accessible to the power of stories told with pictures through to teaching online using only pen and paper.
Oh, wow.
No PowerPoint allowed. So we're very pleased you could join us today. Please tell us a bit more about how you got started in an online world.
Yes, of course. So if I give you a bit of a history of who I am very briefly, that will give you a route through as to where we are now. So as I said, I'm an ex-academic. So I was a social researcher for 10 years, working in universities across the UK. And I got super frustrated with the fact that academics are notoriously rubbish at communicating what they mean in a succinct way, and also in a way that's accessible to all. So Nifty Fox was born 5 years ago now out of that frustration. And throughout the last 5 years, we've been honing our craft to bring stories to life through pictures, to making research outputs more accessible, right through to now working with governments, the Ministry of Justice, Public Health England, to make messages that all of our population need to see more accessible through visual storytelling. So in the last kind of 2 years with the dreaded pandemic, we've really had to adapt what we do. A lot of what we did used to be obviously in person. So we do things like live illustration, graphic facilitation, as well as more traditional graphic design stuff like report design, web design, branding, animation. But the kind of transporting to online has meant we've really had to adapt what we do and also consider things like digital inclusion and exclusion, and how we help universities and the public sector diversify their message in different ways so that other people who are across the spectrum of digital inclusion can access it effectively, which has led to some really, really interesting projects. So we've been doing a lot here in Sheffield, so we're based in Sheffield, with the local council, hospitals and community organisations to make COVID messaging accessible for people for whom English isn't their first language, from lower educational attainment backgrounds, and also for people who might be quite resistant to the vaccine and also the existence of COVID itself. So that's meant that we've had to get very creative about how we present those messages using pictures in a non-threatening and also non-moral way, while also thinking about how do our audiences access these things, because actually most people weren't accessing them through traditional means like news sites, the TV. It became much more about kind of guerrilla marketing, so using WhatsApp, social media, and also kind of peer-to-peer marketing. So how can we use print and digital together to help bring people the right messaging so that they can make informed decisions? So that's something we've been doing recently. And I also mentioned about my hatred of PowerPoint, and I'm sure we're all a bit sick to death of death by PowerPoint. And again, that's born out of the academic preoccupation with too many words on a screen make me look good. And actually too many words on a screen is really difficult to understand, massively disengaging, and also more about the ego of the academic than it is about the needs of the audience. So we teach and do all of our teaching using, we call it paper point, which is a term coined by a visual thinker called Holes Nil Pole, who believes that we should all just be drawing everything all the time. So we use the power of digital technology and put an iPad screen next to my face, and everything is live drawn, so that even teaching becomes a co-produced effort rather than this kind of didactic one-way translation of knowledge. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what we're about and where we're up to.
Fascinating. Yeah. So has there been more demand for your services during lockdown, or has it been about the same?
I've touched all wood that I can find in front of me. We've grown nearly 300% over COVID, which has meant that the team has grown, so it's not just myself anymore. And also the range of what we do has changed. So, you know, we didn't used to do a lot of teaching or module design. In the last 2 years, it's become a massive part of what we do. We also find that we're working, again, with bigger clients because the pandemic has shown us the value of communicating visually and communicating digitally. So it's not enough now to have a one-page Word document explaining the COVID rules. You need to think about how that messaging is portrayed by different audiences and in different places. So yes, touch wood. Yeah, we've been in demand, which is a relief for me.
Great. And what kind of messages or formats have landed the best with people, or with different people maybe?
Yeah, so we found a massive shift in the way that people over 50 are accessing information. So we found a really keen cohort of, and I'm going to use the word silver surfers, and I mean that in a completely non-offensive term, websites. And actually we found that the older generation want more detail in a website that isn't super fancy with loads of animations on, is really hard to grasp. So simple visuals, simple text, and websites have done really well for that. For kind of the younger generation, so we're talking teenagers through to mid-20s, it's been about TikTok, social media, so Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat to some extent. And so the council here in Sheffield and some of the councils I've worked with across the UK have taken their messaging and turned it into 10 to 15 second animations, and even, snappy, slightly humorous posts. So that kind of focus on trying to be viral, if you excuse the awful terminology in our current climate. And again, you know, print isn't dead either, which has been really interesting. So snappy posters, easy leaflets, things that people can pick up, especially in communities where they might not have the best internet access or access to digital tools. Print has still been super important, but the commonality across all of them is simple story told with pictures and really to the point, and actually human language, trying to remove this kind of complete medicalization, especially around COVID, has really helped to try and connect with people as humans rather than as numbers on a government spreadsheet, which probably says a lot about my political leanings, but there you go.
And have your academic ex-colleagues, have they reacted to your change of focus?
Well, they're now employing me, so not too bad, I would assume. Well, I think there's a real big shift, as you're aware, into impact and knowledge mobilisation within the sector, and actually making your work accessible both in language and in format is kind of your bread and butter now, in order to be considered for funding and also to be considered in the research excellent framework. So very well, which is a relief to me, because I sometimes feel like I'm trying to break academia from the outside in. But they're still nice to me and they're employing us, so I can't complain.
And did you have to adapt your skill set to in this new phase of work?
Yeah, so to some extent. So I actually did my first degree in graphic design before dropping out because I didn't think it was academic enough, ironically enough. And then I retrained as a social researcher, so did my postgrad and my degree in sociology and social research and policy. So I did already have that creative skill set. So it's been a combination of combining that with all of the research skills, with all of the creative skills, with this now completely new set of entrepreneurial skills, I'll call them. So I was completely green about how to make a business, but I think I did know how to make things easier for people, which sounds very broad. But I could productize things to help people achieve a goal. And because of my knowledge of the sector and my ability to do that creatively and with a bit of tongue in cheek, it helped me and Nifty Fox stand out in quite a boring traditional environment. So I appreciate that Nifty Fox won't be for every single academic institution's palette, but 90% of them are really switched on to a different way of doing things. And I often joke, as I've said already, that my mission is to break academia. And I think, weirdly, many academics are with me on that. And I think it's about rather than breaking it, it's breaking it down into something even better than it is now, where we can get rid of some of the hierarchies, some of the, again, completely over focus on words alone, and also this publish or perish mentality. Actually, I believe that research and education and universities are there to make social change and difference, not just to have knowledge languishing in a paper that only 10 people read.
Yes, ironically, I always found, I found in Birmingham at the when I used to go to universities, when we could go to kind of bigger gatherings of people, of academics, certainly, that they were keen to publish, but they weren't keen to use the social media as a publication platform. So, they'd talk about their papers, but, you couldn't find it on Twitter. You couldn't find them on Twitter. Sometimes on LinkedIn, if you were lucky. But, certainly Twitter was, like, I think, looked down on just to a certain extent. Has that changed, do you think?
Massively. I think there's a real push now, or the younger generation of researchers are now very aware that you can't operate in a vacuum. So you can't just expect your paper to be read. You have to do some work. So even if you do believe in that publish or perish mentality in order to be promoted and to continue your career, there is an awareness that actually you need to treat your research and yourself like a business. So we work with a lot of institutions to train researchers on how to use Twitter for research publication, promotion, and also how to adapt your messaging for different platforms. So I think there's a massive shift in that. And there's also some great work already being done by researchers. There's a Professor Mark Carrigan, who is doing a whole sociology of digital marketing for researchers. So there's a lot out there now, both in the actual academic rigorous publication space and more informally in doctoral training programs that look at how do you promote your work, both from a selfish read my publication so it gets more citations, but also from a point of this is how impact happens. You need to take the academic work and turn it into messaging that makes sense to more than just that other one expert in your field who's a million miles away.
Yeah,
it's been a long-term phenomenon. This, I mean, I'm old enough to remember Carl Sagan when he was doing his popularization of some aspects of science. And in those days, he really was looked down, as you say, he really was looked down upon and was suspected by others of goodness knows what, because in those days it was it was much more so even than now. And I think as new technologies have come along, academics have eventually, each generation has picked up a new one and gone with it. So I'm wondering how you think this will move forward now from here. You say that people are much more. It's great to hear of training courses and so on and all of this for researchers. But what do you think? How do you think it might progress beyond where we are now, and who's going to lead that?
Really good question. I think I have my idealistic view of where.
Yes, that's always a good one.
Where I think it more realistically will end up. So in an ideal world, I would hope that the impact of your research is valued as highly as your publication citation. So if within academia we can have this culture shift where your time is as equally rewarded for impact work, so engaging with stakeholders, doing work with people like us at Nifty Fox to disseminate your research more widely, if that is given the same credence and value as I'm sat here writing a paper or doing all of these experiments, only when those two things are valued equally will we see real change. But I do feel like we're getting there.
Yeah.
And it will happen, and it will happen differently across different institutions, depending on how old they are and what kind of school of academia they subscribe to. So actually the future for me is I would love to see universities have a completely open knowledge database that isn't just publications that sit behind a paywall, but also lay summaries, animated versions of every single piece of research that comes out, comics, thinking about completely different ways that each bit of research has to have. So it isn't enough to just have a publication. There has to be a lay version, a version that can be accessed by people of different neurodivergent abilities, and also is more engaging.
Yeah.
And I think that's my ideal future, in that the barriers between universities and everybody else is much more blurred. where I think it will end up is somewhere between my ideal and where it is now, which is, you know, the research excellence framework and impact is even more apparent in the work that institutions are doing and is again more valued. But I still think unless there's this shift in how academics are rewarded within their career, and also how they're expected and encouraged to spend their time, we will never have my idealistic vision unless we can get around that. And the core of that is money, what makes universities money, because there is a business element to that.
Yeah.
And also how we operate as a society. Are we going to become more privatized? Are we going to be more individualistic? Or are we going to wake up from the pandemic and think, actually, working together and being a bit more altruistic and looking out for each other is a good thing? So it will, I'm hopeful, but I'm sure there are many other political, socioeconomic, maybe even climate factors that will impact that.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think the points you make about age and background and style of institution are really interesting. As I keep mentioning, I'm involved in the technical side in the Orkney International Science Festival.
Oh, cool.
And it's quite clear from our guests who has been along some of the journey that you've described and who hasn't.
Yeah.
Now, not all the best talks are by people who go along, you know, and who make everything look great. Some people can stand up in front of a PowerPoint and make it really interesting. But it's really clear that the current generation of kind of postdoctoral researchers is much more attuned to this stuff than the previous generation was, and much more comfortable doing it. Not to say that the older people aren't doing it as well.
Yeah, of course.
But the range of different styles of presentation and so on. Mainly, it is still PowerPoint, hopefully with lots of pictures in it. But every now and again, you get a really exciting one that's using something else, and they really do stand out. And so it'd be great to think that people could become, as you say, rewarded for doing that sort of work as well. Yeah, so
you've got some really nice examples on your website, Laura.
Oh, thank you.
Of
maybe we should show one.
Oh wow, this is where I feel like I'm being moderated at school. Oh God.
Which one is the one? Have you got a favourite or a?
You go for it. No, I'm interested to see what you think. So we'll caveat this with, we are about to go through a big web redesign, so it isn't how I'd like it to be just yet. But
it's very clear.
That's what I wanted, is clarity.
Okay, let's bring it up, and we will now appear one by one in the corner of the picture of your website. We are only visible now to the public if we are actually talking, as I am now. So I'm going to. What about just showing your show reel? How about that?
Yeah, you'll have some lovely piano music.
Oh, here we go then.
Yeah.
Stand by. There we go. I can't work out how to minimize that, so I'll unshift for a while. Wow. Exciting, yes.
Yeah.
So that's us, yeah. So that's a flavour of everything we did probably last year. And the final thing there, so the Active at Home booklet is what we produced in collaboration with Public Health England and the National Centre for Sports and Exercise Medicine here in Sheffield. and that was about getting kind of information that's crucial about not deconditioning and remaining mentally well at the beginning of lockdown in March last year, to people that were digitally excluded. So it was entirely printed and went out to over 2 million people nationally, and actually won an advanced healthcare award, simply because people could use it, and it was something they could pin on their fridge and that they could engage with, and didn't look like all of the scary NHS we're all going to die messaging from March of 2020. So that was one thing that we were really proud of at the beginning of the pandemic, because it was a scary time for everybody, and to be able to do something quickly in collaboration with so many important and valuable stakeholders, both from an institutional point of view, but also from communities and the average person on the street. To be received so well, it was a real proud moment.
So it was national, it wasn't just Sheffield?
No, it went everywhere, So we started in Sheffield with a pilot with 20,000 copies, and it got snapped up by other councils around us, and then Public Health England got in touch and said, we want to use this nationally.
Wow. Great.
Help us do that, please. So it was lovely to prove the concept, because we knew, myself and Anna Lowe over at the NCSEM, and there's my first acronym of the day.
Yes, please explain that for our listeners.
So it's the National Centre for Sports and Exercise Medicine. We knew that it would work, but we needed to prove it here in Sheffield, and thankfully the wonderful Sheffield community that we live in kind of took it on board, and there was people ringing into the local radio station, BBC Radio Sheffield, saying how much they'd enjoyed using it. It was on the news, and we didn't have to do much PR around it. It sort of found its own way there, which I think is
very
even more valuable.
Absolutely. How are you how is digital kind of it's a bit of a clunky kind of connection, but how does digital inclusion in Sheffield manifest itself then? If people are finding this easy to relate to, I suppose they're saying we'd like something on paper, but are they also using online resources?
Yeah, absolutely. So that initial booklet in kind of March, April of 2020 grew into a whole campaign here in Sheffield that we led on with the council, a social prescribing organisation called SOAR, and loads of other community groups who will shoot me for not mentioning them, but I love them all, and you're all fabulous.
They're all mentioned on the website, I'm sure.
Yes, they are all mentioned on the website. That grew into COVID Smart, which was a campaign that we developed that's been running now for over 12 months, that took some of the messaging from the booklet that landed so well and turned it into community-specific messaging with community-specific imaging that's now being used on social media, being used in online forums. So there was a lot of community forums that sprung up online over Zoom, especially for different communities in Sheffield that might not have access to healthcare, or even, we were all socially isolated at that point too. So that grew into this whole digital version of the campaign, which was primarily social media, animations, quick GIFs that could be sent via text or WhatsApp, and also then all of the presentations and marketing that went around online forums to discuss COVID, to discuss vaccine hesitancy, to discuss mental health. So I think we realised the importance of stuff that was printed, but we also knew that in order to create communities of people to discuss this in a way that was a safe space and effective, we also needed to bring it into a digital realm. So they kind of needed to work together in order for the most people to be accessed. And there was a lot around, from an accessibility and diversity point of view, we did a lot around captioning, making sure that we had large text versions, plain text versions, that we were translating it into as many languages as possible. And we've actually sold some of the rights now to the council so that they have way more translation power and accessibility power than we do as a small business here in Sheffield. So I think it's been really interesting to see how the print and the digital have needed to work together. And again, a lot of those COVID Smart campaign posters, it's quite scary when you walk around town and you see your work and you're like, oh God, yeah, I did that. That it's about brand recognition to some extent. So that, COVID Smart or Vaccinate Sheffield have become hashtags that have trended in Sheffield and that are very noticeable around the city. So it's kind of this online and offline was going to use the word barrage of messaging, but that sounds really aggressive.
But
this kind of drip approach, so that people can engage with it.
Reinforcement from one to the other.
Yeah, that's a much better word. Reinforcement, a barrage of messaging you don't want.
Well, barrage of messaging is what we really think, but yeah.
And have you found responses from just ordinary people in the street, shall we call them, who kind of have responded to your
but one of my favorite things that happened to me was I was sat in a GP surgery waiting for a regular checkup, and the woman next to me said, "Oh, have you seen this leaflet about the vaccinations? It's fantastic." And I took it from her, and I got quite emotional because I was like, I said, "Do you know what? I'm the person that's done all of these with the council. This is my company." And she was like, "Oh my God, it's great. I've seen it everywhere. I tell my kids." And then also, in another vein, is to have friends and family see it around Sheffield and get pictures and go, "Look what I've seen on the bus stop." And so from that sense of people seeing it, and also, sorry, that's my head of marketing, Ruben, having a moment. He's very, very interested in what we're having to say.
Yes, wants to have his contribution.
So, from that kind of micro level, that's been fantastic, but also just to see how it's been taken on board by other organisations. So a key part of what we try and do at Nifty Fox is that anything we produce visually can be edited and changed within licensing restraints by the people it's for, so that it lives and breathes with them. Because we recognise, especially over COVID, stuff changes every week. I can't wear a mask today, but no, I can wear a mask. Or I can't remember, where are we? You know what I mean? Tomorrow I have to wear a mask. There you go. So we try and make it so that it can adapt, and actually being able to see organisations take up all of the assets and use them for their own communities in their own way to get that message across has been really humbling, because we gave them the tools. They know how to do it better than we do. And it's about making, again, knowledge, visuals accessible to all so that it can be adapted for all.
It's been such a so go ahead.
Visuals can overcome like language barriers in a way nothing else can. So have you found some, I've seen myself in Birmingham, the Birmingham Chinese Community Centre did some really excellent just diagrams based on government information that really they needed in their community, because the material wasn't being translated at the time. Have you found that sort of thing in Sheffield as well?
Yeah, so we've been really lucky to be able to work with local community organisations from different areas of Sheffield. So those that serve the Afro-Caribbean community, the Chinese community, the Polish community, the Roma community. So we've been blessed with their insight. So they've been able to help us create culturally relevant images. Because, I recognise my position as a white middle-class woman and my privilege, that actually what I think makes sense and is relevant has a completely different view from somebody of another culture. So it's been actually quite a good challenge to think about visuals in their simplest form, but in their most pure form, to remove all of that cultural referencing, to go just to the jugular, really, of the essence of what we mean. And also representation being so important. If we're talking to these communities, they need to see characters and places that look and feel like them. And so to have them co-create that experience with us is a privilege, as well as quite a pressure, because we need to do it justice. But touch wood, we've done okay.
It's been such a interesting 18 months, hasn't it? I was just thinking what you said a little bit earlier about being adaptable, because I think one of the most difficult things about the current situation is how many things change and how often. And I'm astonished that the messages have been able to be got out as well as even as they have, because when you think of all the changes, and remember all the levels in Scotland, in England you had levels 1 to 3, so then in Scotland we decided we have levels 0 to 3 or 1 to 4 or something. I can't remember. And you just think, goodness me, the will to keep up with that stuff, however important it is finite. And the more you can get in this kind of direct visual way, the better it is for everyone. I've just found Ruben Evans Hill on your website. As
There's
head,
my
that was
dog.
what I was laughing at earlier.
Yeah.
In case you thought I was laughing at something you were saying. Probably the brains behind the operation. Ruben is our chief marketer and on hand for all morale boosting cuddles. He's the best for talking through ideas, tearing you away from the desk for walks at regular intervals, and barking his opinion on Zoom calls.
He's done it today. He's lived up to his profile.
It's excellent. Yeah.
Brilliant.
But it's I put Reeves on there because, you know, a big value of mine that I always wanted to bring into Nifty Fox and my business is to get rid of this kind of corporate academic stuffy vibe, because I always felt slightly stifled by it when I worked within it. And also, you know, I think it's great for my clients because they're welcomed into an environment where they can think differently.
And you're immediately open to discussion and having a laugh and
exactly
thinking about things differently. Yes,
definitely. So, you know,
mind you, I don't like I mean, all respect to Joanna, being described as an admin avenger I'm not even going to read that paragraph.
She's incredible, but yes, she avenges all administrative tasks here at Nifty. But that's what I mean. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be stuffy. And people do their best work when they're relaxed.
Absolutely,
to do be themselves.
For sure.
Definitely.
For sure.
And that's the way we work.
Yeah. Laura, in years to come, all going well, we'll be looking back on this time and sort of being amazed, I think, at all the things we managed to do and produce. Are you keeping an archive of the materials that you produce, and kind of have certain things been superseded already?
Yeah, so you can actually, I will pop a link somewhere in the chat when I can remember it. So the COVID smart stuff, all of the COVID messaging we've done is in our COVID resources hub on our website. In fact, that's in the journal pages if you scroll down a little bit.
I've got that, yes. I've got that.
So everything is there. But yeah, it gets superseded all the time. But because those links link through to a live updated G Drive folder, there's my latest blog post. You can head to the G Drive folder, which is updated regularly, but it's not just updated by us, it's updated by community organisations across Sheffield and also nationally. So that's worth checking out. But that's in the journal pages, not quite there, but I will find the link and pop it. If I don't pop it in the chat, I'll email it to you.
That will also appear then in the description on this YouTube
of the show.
video.
Yeah, that's really generous of you and not typical, shall I say, Laura? What's inspired you to be, sort of open and sharing your resources like this?
Because I believe that if you give value to people and you do it freely, you will get that back. I can't achieve my mission of making knowledge more accessible and compelling for all and getting people to tell stories unless I'm open and transparent and vulnerable in going, I'm so confident in what we do, you can have it. You can have it and use it and enjoy it.
Which is near enough the original academic spirit, or the idealized academic spirit, perhaps we should better call it, because it's probably never been as pure as that in actual life. But no, it really is. It's the kind of common good stuff.
Exactly. And I think especially when it's around something as important as COVID, it doesn't serve anybody if I sat here and said, well, you need to pay me millions and millions of pounds to use it. Well, we've been paid for the work we've done and we've been paid fairly. But beyond that, as the people that own the licensing to the work, I want to make sure that people get to use it and enjoy it. So, and get value out of it. So that, I think I give as much of my time and value as I can that makes business sense for free, because that is how I'll achieve my bigger purpose in life, which sounds a bit Buddha and a bit woo-woo, but it's true. And I think it's the same with all things, on our blogs and social media outputs, we try and do good things for people to not only tell you that we're good, but show you that we're good at our job and that it works and that visual storytelling has science behind it, can help you achieve impact, can actually drive audiences to action. And I'd rather just show you that by doing something for you that for free in 5 minutes than kind of make you sit behind a paywall of £1 million to come and have a go. So yeah, that's why we do it.
I've just found is it Padlet with all sorts of things, illustrations and icons and photos and all sorts of things. Lots to explore on your website. I'm not going to keep sharing it because it makes some of the call look a bit funny.
No worries.
But, No,
But
that's
do go and
all-
enjoy, go and use,
Yeah.
and start, using a pen and paper to explain things rather than feeling like we have to hide behind a PowerPoint all the time.
That's really good. Laura, I'm not sure you can stay with us for the rest of the show. How are you fixed or?
Yeah, I'm going to need to nip off in well nowish because I'm actually interviewing at 3:00 for a new Nifty Fox Cub, so that's very exciting.
Well, good luck with that.
Wish you luck with that. Thanks a million for joining us today.
No worries. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks to Rob for nominating you, and we look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah,
brilliant. And let me know how I can share the podcast and get people to watch it. And
Thank you very much.
Email you links afterwards. But thanks for having me. Take care.
Great.
Lovely.
Thanks
Thank
for coming
you.
on.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great stuff.
That's great.
Lots to take in there. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Okie dokie. So we will all the links to that Laura sends us that we have already, we'll post on the video when it's online, so people can pick up and follow up any of that. And Laura's been generous to share the materials on the website. So let's all take advantage of that. I can see us telling her about Comms Camp, Sweyn, and sort of encouraging her to come to that. I think that'd be great. I think she'd find a lot more kind of friends and allies there as well.
Yes, for sure.
So we talked about the Kira's blog on the DPIS 2021 day 4 on the
DPIS. What did that stand for?
Digital Divide,
Data Poverty
Inclusion Summit.
That's it.
Yeah. So
I knew that.
Digital Poverty Inclusion Summit. Yeah. So that was a really good first blog, and then for day 4 of the DPIS summit, and day 5 was on beating the barriers, online safety, security, and accessibility. And of course, our old friend Simon Finch will have thoughts about this, and we might get him back to or ask him what he thinks of this. But this is another post written by Kira.
Great to see that having a full session.
Yes, absolutely, very important. The blog post reminds us that into September 2020, the government announced a new national data strategy, which aspired to make the UK the safest place in the world to go online. And safety was at the heart of this strategy for tech innovation and growth. And the legislative manifestation is the draft online safety bill, which I think Simon does write about on his website as well. And this sets out a new regulatory regime to tackle harmful content online by placing a duty of care on certain internet service providers that allow users to upload content and search the internet. And so this was the focus of the, as I said, the Digital Poverty and Inequality Summit on day 5. So roundtable speakers and contributors included members of the Commons and Lords involved in drafting or evaluating the bill, Representative of Barnardo's, the Children's Media Centre, TikTok, the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, and the NSPCC, to name but a few. So this one was more focused with a piece of draft legislation in the pipeline. Obviously, there was a clear goal for potential for impact on how people experience the internet. And Kira was struck by how this fact rendered the discussion more consequential, but perhaps less capacious. And she draws out 3 points that I think are worth following up on. She says, with the country on the cusp of legislation that would protect people from online harms, harmful but elusive issues like inequality, bias, and discrimination received hardly a mention. So that was a shame. But up to 3 points that she did pull out, they were that the online safety bill must do more to address the most egregious harms to children, especially exposure to pornography and grooming. That Ofcom must be adequately supported to take on its new power and responsibility under the bill, and that a legislated approach to online harms must be adaptive and focusing on the systems level in order to be future facing.
Oh, wait a minute. What's the third one? Alleged. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we must keep up with what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I've said earlier, the blogs that Kira wrote about this 5-day summit are really well worth people spending some time on. And when we the links to them are after last week's show and this week's show.
Yep.
So please do follow up on them, and we hope to have Kira on again.
They're all on the digitalpovertyalliance.org website. They're quite prominent on the website, so you can find them directly as well if you
very good
need to.
Okie doke. So moving on, we've picked up something on Twitter, and this was an infographic, kind of harking back to Laura's work. And this shows how the digital divide affects education, healthcare, and economics worldwide. So if we can bring that one up, I thought that was a really interesting Can you make it any bigger on the screen,
I think
Sweyn? I
so.
wasn't able to, but it's loading.
Oh no.
No,
hang
it's
on,
gonna.
yes.
Oh, there we go. If you can go behind that,
Right,
brilliant.
right.
So that's the global
No,
tech
that's as
gap.
big as it'll go.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good.
I don't know what that looks
So
like online. It's probably not very clear. But,
yeah, well, hopefully people can relate to it with the link we'll post. But it talks about,
yes.
who can get online. The left and right picture of that. It's gone funny on my screen now.
Sorry, that's because I've done something silly. Yes,
Okay. That there are 327 million fewer women than men globally have a smartphone. I'm trying to read the small text there. The $130 million money lost a day in US economic activity when people can't get online. That's only the US. So obviously the rest of the world will also need to bring in about that. The budget for broadband development in the bipartisan international bill passed by Congress was $65 billion.
Wow.
So $1 billion. So they're obviously recognizing the need there. So all these figures here relate, I think, to the US.
They do,
I think,
and it's a bit difficult to get your head around them. I'm finding. I mean, is 65 billion a big number compared to? I mean, I don't know. I guess it is.
But there's good graphics anyway about
yes,
laptop and smartphone ownership, the difference in full access, 40% in both.
14% to a difference in full access to both a computer and broadband internet among rural students
yeah,
at 63% versus urban students at 77%.
Yeah.
So that's something about I guess that's something about affordability and infrastructure, and I guess that's some of the issues that the well heralded infrastructure bill in the US will look at. So it's good. I think to be completely fair, I think the UK, all parts of the UK have been looking at this now for quite a while, and I think some progress has been made in the UK, in the various parts of it. Obviously, there's always more to be done, but I think the US is behind on this sort of thing, as they are in a lot of infrastructure matters over the last 20 or 30 years, for the way that the US politics has polarized and made it more difficult to get things done. So it's great to see digital inclusion being included in the package of progressive measures that appear to be going ahead now.
What's one kind of very sad number on the top right? 3 in 10 parents reporting that their children have to do their homework on a cell phone.
Oh wow!
I mean, God,
yes.
can you imagine?
I know.
It's handy to have a cell phone, but it's not exactly a good screen to work on. To do anything more than texting and searching a bit. So yeah, I think the Good Things Foundation have produced a digital divide slide for the UK. So perhaps we'll look at that another time.
I'm just noticing another statistic there. 17%. That's nearly 2 in 10 children unable to complete their homework due to limited internet access. So I guess that some of those will be the same people and some of them will be different people. So it could be more than 3 in 10 that are impacted for one reason or another.
Yeah.
Just at the most basic level of doing homework.
Good. So another couple of stories before we close the show today. The next one is the item was called It Takes a Village, and this was a Medium account created in collaboration with AI tools and contains stories written through human and AI collaboration. I thought this was interesting just from that perspective, but there's some really useful, if you're getting started off in digital inclusion work, as many of us are still, it's helpful to have this kind of, it's like a list of what to do and not to do in some ways. And some lines are taken from it. For change to be sustainable, it's incumbent on all allies in the community to step up to the plate. So it's saying practically, how can other community anchors, including the private sector, encourage more people to get online, teach, explain, and demonstrate the benefits of digital inclusion? So a couple of pointers to pull out of it were inform people about what they could do online but don't know how to use. So it's saying show people the benefits of using the internet, smartphones, and tablet computers, using a variety of languages and access formats to meet people where they are. And this kind of seems a bit basic, Sweyn, but some people really don't know where to get started. So it's good to have some pointers about that. The next thing is talk about what you can do online yourselves so people can see it happening in real life. For example, businesses could show digital feedback channels such as TripAdvisor or use Facebook or Twitter to talk about their projects or services in a helpful way. And I remember, Sweyn, when I was doing business advice support some years ago, saying that, you know, there were materials out there on TripAdvisor and so on that people were talking about your products. So why not use them as, you know, part of your marketing? Yeah, absolutely. And it goes on to say educational institutions talk about how they're using digital technology to promote their school. And the next point I pulled out was use technology tools that are easy to use and work on all platforms, including smartphones, tablets, PCs, and non-PC devices. A kind of basic
really
tip, really, but yeah.
That's a really important accessibility point. To make things as good as they can. I mean, if people only have a phone at the time that they're reading your content, whether that's all they have or whether that's just they're out and about or whatever, it makes such a difference if the content is designed to be used properly on a smartphone compared to what it isn't. We've all tried to scroll around an enormous homepage which you can only see 4% of on your phone screen, but it's going to be much more successful if a version of online stuff, tools, websites, whatever, is specifically thinking about use on a smartphone, even if it makes clear that you can't do everything. Even that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. The article goes on to say, innovate ways to get people online, whether at home, in the workplace, or elsewhere. Games, for example, can help people learn to use a phone or tablet device. Apps may be a better way of making content available offline. In addition, technology tools that are made available free of charge to charitable organizations can encourage more people to get online. Two more points in this that were made strongly. Simplify the sign-up process. Oh, please, please do that. And make it simpler for people who do not have a good digital literacy skills or a computer. And this may mean not having a sign-up form, but rather handing over a card with your details on it and indicating where you want the offer sent when you receive your products or services. So, you know, it's again the kind of offering the non-digital alongside the digital, because not everybody is at that place yet. It kind of towards the end of the article says articles like this can be adapted to fit a local audience, but the principles remain the same. Community networks need to realize a huge part of their work is getting people online. And if people hear nothing else, then I hope they hear that and kind of get on board with it. It has been proven that if people can get online, they will use it and find many ways to make better use of their time. So some of us are trying to do that, and the more people that do that, the better it will be for all of us.
And it's really linked with the kind of line that Laura was taking there, our guest. You've got to engage with people in ways that directly appeals to them and that they can use and that they can see. And it's also, as John Popham always said, you know, tell stories, show interesting things. Don't be dry and inhuman in the online stuff.
Yeah, we've got two more stories, Sweyn. We're going to try and get them in before we finish.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so this one is older adults learn digital skills thanks to innovative partnership, and this was from Glasgow. Glasgow's Golden Generation, which is a charity for older adults, is working with One Connect CIC to provide vital digital skills to older adults in the city. So they say that during the first lockdown, GGG saw how few of its older adults were able to use technology and launched a project providing service users with tablet devices to target digital exclusion. And they created a bespoke app to help get older adults online when it wasn't possible to use face-to-face training. But now that the charity's day centres have reopened, the charity has 2 part-time digital inclusion officers running classes and finding new opportunities to introduce older adults to technology. They've teamed up as well with a social enterprise, One Connect CIC, which is Glasgow-based social enterprise that specialises in digital consulting to show older adults how to create short videos on a theme of their choice. This sounds really good, and great. One John would have loved, I think.
Yes.
So they're having weekly workshops, and participants are relishing the opportunity to let their creative side loose. And they create a storyboard, and so far videos created have included a collection of recipes, a family timeline, and photos of how one participant's garden has flourished over lockdown and beyond.
Oh, fantastic.
They sound brilliant. You know, things that you could just watch again and again and make you feel really engaged and engaging with, you know, friends and family. Right. Before we go, then I just want to do this last story, which is I found again on Twitter, and it was a bit worrying, really. phone companies stealing back phone numbers.
Yeah,
And this is from Worthy on the web.
it's left me more speechless as well.
Yes, I couldn't believe it. So this Claire, is it Claire Worthington, her name is, yeah.
Yes.
So she's on Twitter, she's also on Instagram, and she's did the story on Instagram, and what she says is, just wasted some of my credit by ringing myself so that the gift gaff can't steal my spare number back. Lots of people have an old number on an old stroke spare phone for use in emergencies. I have a big problem with huge multinational companies stealing back mobile numbers from customers just because the line hasn't been used for a while.
It's amazing.
So, yeah, I couldn't believe it. There's 2 links to Instagram as well where she talks a bit more about it. And
Okay, so we're on the first link.
Screen.
We're at the first one, and then the second one is.
Click on the second one, yeah. So this is the message that she's had from giffgaff. It's been a long time since you last used your giffgaff SIM. That's fine. This is just a final notice to let you know that your number will be reallocated to a new member in 5 days. And if you want to stay part of giffgaff, you can scroll down a bit, Sweyn. You need to use your SIM before, and it gives a certain date. So she had over £9 of phone credit, and what she's saying is giffgaff is taking back, just because she hasn't needed to use it yet. And that does sound odd,
it sounds
to say the least.
weird. I suppose this only applies to prepaid phones, I suppose.
Looks like.
It'd be interesting to know if Ofcom has guidance or rules on this, because if not, I think probably they should.
So I think I will follow up Claire and see if she wants to come and talk about this. It sounds like,
I love her ranty McRant face.
Yes,
well. That's
definitely.
Okay. One that's easy to remember.
Yes, definitely. Okay, I think we've come to the end of the show. In fact, we've maybe run over slightly.
Not much.
No, okay. So thanks everybody for joining us, and hope you have a great week. Have a great week.
Have a great week, everyone.